Alright, good morning, AP European History. This is March 18th, a Wednesday in the great hiatus of 2020. We finished up Unit 11 yesterday, and I posted the test. I'm also posting my handwritten notes. I posted, I'm going to try to post the YouTube, the Crash Course YouTube European History videos that kind of correspond. I would suggest, I know that y'all not big fans, but I would really suggest doing that as reinforcement now, especially since you're not getting full notes in class and everything else. But anyway, so we're going to start Unit, I know the numbers are a little bit off because of last year, but everything else. This says 11, I need to fix it. It's actually 12. So this is the new Unit 12 because I've readjusted Unit some. So this is Unit 12, not Unit 11. The Great War, the Revolution, and in-between years. This is also the beginning of Period 4, which brings me to my next point. At this point, feel free to read the chapters, but I'm not really corresponding that much with the chapters anymore. I'm going to have basically 2 more units, if not 3. I think just 2. And just wrap up Period 4 material as much as I need to. It'll probably be long periods, but it'll be just to be to cover what we can before the test itself takes place. Anyway, so this first unit is a regular unit. It's not going to correspond. I mean, if it's the next 2 chapters. I think the next 2 chapters were like 25, 26. I can't remember the numbers, but anyway, that's where we kind of are right now. Anyway, that's what we're looking at for this next unit. But this unit's going to be the Great War, meaning World War I, the Revolution years with like Russia, and the in-between years. Okay, so we're starting with World War I. All right, so World War I as a European conflict. A number of factors caused World War I. France badly wanted to regain Alsace-Lorraine that had lost back in the 1870s in the Franco-Prussian War. Germany's desire to expand its territory and influence had alarmed Britain and Russia as well, too. And you also have the pre-war alliances. The pre-war alliances were also very important to this because, as we know, the pre-war alliances make this go from a local conflict in the Balkans to a international conflict. So you had France, Britain, and Russia tied together in the Triple Entente to try to counter any growing German power. And you had the Germans and Austrian-Hungarians have been tied together for many years in the Triple Alliance. Italy was part of this as well, too. But as you probably remember from last year in U.S. history, Italy would actually not join the Triple Alliance whenever the war breaks out. Smaller nations felt pressure to take sides as well. And so this brings us back to mania that you learn in U.S. history. The 4 main underlying causes and, of course, the main action, which is the assassination. So the first 4 are militarism, alliances, nationalism, and imperialism. So those are the 4 main causes for why World War I happened. Militarism, alliances, nationalism, and imperialism. So first we do militarism real quick. Well, actually, I guess on this PowerPoint I have imperialism. So we already know what imperialism is. It's where they've been trying to go out and conquer more territories to get resources, more markets, and of course that leads to competition. So imperialism is a big factor because obviously with this competition, it makes them feel more and more pressure to add to the military and try to outdo each other. Then you get militarism. Militarism is the arming of European countries. It grew every nation. It grew as every nation began to accumulate arms for both offensive and defensive purposes. Between 1890 and 1910, defensive expenditures or military expenditures had more than doubled in the major European powers. So you have the alliances, which of course makes this more of an international affair. Imperialism, which of course drives up competition for more land and power and markets and so forth. Militarism is of course growing to help protect that growing trade with imperialism and to try to enforce their competition. And then nationalism, the last one, this is also dramatically increased, especially since unification of Germany and Italy. Movements like the Pan-Slavism had caused unrest in the Habsburg Empire. We also know the Balkans as the powder keg. That's what's often referred to as the powder keg of Europe, waiting to explode. Citizens wanted strong government that would protect and promote their interests, their national interests, like, the German ideas or the Italian ideas or the British or French or whatever. And so military, stronger military, armies, navies was what they wanted to basically get this accomplished. Okay, so the war in Europe and how it breaks out. So this is the last part of Mania, the assassination, which is the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He's the nephew of the reigning emperor of Austria-Hungary. The same guy's been on the throne for over 50 years, Franz Joseph. Anyway, so the road to war begins with the assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which I have a picture of here at the bottom in an illustration of the assassination. He was killed by a Serbian nationalist in Sarajevo on June 28th, 1914. So what was happening was that after Austria-Hungary had gained some of that territory in the Balkans fairly recently, he was on this goodwill tour in Southeast Europe and the Balkans. Sarajevo was full of Serbs, but those Serbs, of course, want to be independent and free. They want to be part of Serbia, which had already become a country years before this. So anyway, there was this terrorist organization called the Black Hand that pledged to kill the Archduke whenever he showed up. And so they actually missed their first opportunity, and then later that night, whenever his car got lost in the streets of Sarajevo, one of their members, Gavrilo Princip, the assassin, saw him and found him, took the opportunity, and shot he and his wife in his car. So June 28th, 1914 is when Franz Ferdinand is killed by the Serbian nationalist Gavrilo Princip. Basically, Germany, who was allied with Austria-Hungary, said, hey, we got your back, do what you need to do. So feeling that Germany had their back because of these alliances, Austria-Hungary put a lot of pressure on Serbia to turn over the assassins and make a lot of concessions. Many concessions they realized that Serbia couldn't meet, and this would allow for Austria-Hungary to basically take over Serbia. So a month later, after making this, all these demands and demanding concessions from Serbia and the Black Hand and so forth, they don't meet them, which is not surprising to really anybody. So in late July, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. In response, Serbia's ally, Russia and Serbia are allied because they are very close cousins in terms of ethnicities. So Serbia's ally, Russia, mobilized its forces, thus heightening tension. So Russia begins to, not fire a shot yet, but begins to mobilize their forces to go help protect them. Germany, hoping to gain quick victory over underprepared adversaries, declared war on Russia on August 1st, and then a few days later on France. So at first, the Kaiser of Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II, the guy we've been talking about, decides he wants to win a quick victory, basically catch him off guard and win the war before it really gets going. He declares war on Russia after they are threatening to go after and help Serbia against Austria-Hungary. And because Russia is allied with France, and France and Germany are longtime enemies, 2 days later on August 3rd is whenever they declare war on France. Almost immediately, Germany mobilizes their forces and begins an invasion through neutral Belgium. Belgium already declared neutrality, but they decide that the easiest and fastest way to get to France is to go through Belgium. So they begin to do that on August 3rd and put their troops there against Belgium's wishes because they're neutral. When Britain sees this, they were on the fence about coming to war, but when they see that neutral Belgium was invaded on August 4th, Britain will declare war on Germany. And so boom, 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 like that, the alliances bring all these countries to war. And then I have a little chart on the screen there too that kind of shows you the alliances and developments and how we got to where we are. But that's essentially what happens. So so more countries will join in. So these alliances that existed before the war will dissolve. They'll no longer be the Triple Alliance or the Triple Entente. They'll become the wartime alliance names, which are the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. So over time, throughout the 4 years of the war, about 32 countries will end up fighting in this war. The Central Powers will be mainly the main three, Germany, Austria, Hungary. Like we said, Italy never joined them. So it's the Ottoman Empire will eventually join them. So later that year, 1914, Ottoman Empire will join the Germany and Austria-Hungary. And Bulgaria will join them later on too. So the Allied powers will be France, Britain, and Russia. And then later on, 1915, Italy finally decides that they can get land and property if they join the Allied powers. So they end up joining with the Allied powers in 1915. And of course, the United States will join the Allied powers in 1917. So the war will be fought on two fronts. The Germans try to quickly take out the first front with France, but failed to do so. So this will be a two-front war. The Western Front was mostly fought in Belgium and France. Don't worry about any noises you hear in the background because those are my wife's here, so she's got the children. Anyway, the Western Front was 400 miles through Belgium and France. Mainly it's very stagnant, as you know from U.S. history. And the Eastern Front was about 1,000 miles long along the Russian border from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Okay, so that finishes the first slide. Let's go to slide 2. Well, here's a map, and I don't know what you can see this, but this shows you the scale of World War I. Last year, you only really addressed the Western Front, which is over here in France and in Belgium, which is where Americans fought. But as you can see, this is the Eastern Front here. There's all kinds of long fighting that takes place over here. There's fighting back and forth, as you can see from the arrows. There's fighting down here in the Middle East, like the most famous battle being Gallipoli, where the British tried to invade the Ottoman Empire. And there's, of course, fighting along the Austrian-Italian border here, too. So there's fighting all over the place. This really was a global conflict because there's even fighting off in the colonies, even in Asia. But we're mostly just going to focus on the European fronts here in general. So anyway, let's look at our next slide. And we'll start off this next slide and we'll go to the next video here in a second. All right, so look at the Western Front. So Germany invaded Belgium in August of 1914, as we just said, and swiftly overwhelmed the small country. Because they weren't prepared for any of this, they had declared neutrality. Germany was executing what was called the Schlieffen Plan, named after a German general who had already planned this out. If Germany was ever going to war, how would they best fight? So it was named after a German general named General Alfred von Schlieffen. Basically, the idea was that you had to quickly move through Belgium, take out Belgium, and then take out France, capture Paris, and Russia would be so slow to mobilize that you could basically wait on Russia. You take out France very quickly, capture Paris, they're defeated, then you go after Russia, even though they're still taking a long time to get prepared. And that way you don't have to fight a two-front war. So that was their goal. Which is why they invaded Belgium. Though by the end of the month, by the end of August, German forces had invaded France, but the offense got bogged down. That it wasn't as swift as they thought it would be. The Western Front then turns into trench warfare. So after fighting with like horse chargers and like men charging each other, but not realizing the impact the machine guns would have and other artillery-type weapons, the Western Front quickly turned into trench warfare. And as you know from U.S. history, that the Western Front will basically dig these trenches on both sides, and little will change over the next 4 years of the war. Basically, they each dug in, and they'll occasionally pop up and attack each other, but nothing really massive comes out of this in general. So we'll stop the first video.